Elsa from Luxury Gaming, and I'm here with one of our teammates.
Hi, I'm Kevin Barrington, known as Danzor online.
Okay, how did you do today?
I made 25th.
That is amazing. You got the nice Elsa card, which we'll show you. And then what colors did we play?
I played a Blurple deck, which is kind of interesting because it's not the mainstream decks these days.
Exactly. Okay, I'm excited to see it.
The main portion of the deck is we always want to hit a 1-drop, which we are running 9 of currently. And in general, you can run any of these 3, but with the various different aggro decks in the format, I really prefer having cards with power on them to be able to challenge early if needed, so I went lowest on the Diablos. The Diablo is actually really good against control decks where you're dealing against swords or big board sweepers from red-blue, where this card's always guaranteeing you a card, but in general, I wanted to not be weak to aggro.
Now, did you find that you missed 3 more Diablos, or just the 1 was perfect?
I think it was fine because I don't want that many 1-drops, because if I go too high on 1-drops, you'll draw them a lot late in the game, and you can't really exchange them for a new card immediately usually.
God, and sometimes people don't even want to attack your Diablo because they don't want you to draw the card.
Right.
Okay, let's see the next cards that we have.
All right. So then the main goal for turn 2 on the deck is to ramp.
Okay.
So we have a ramp package of 4 sails and 4 T-pos. In general, sail is played if you have another 1-drop in your hand because your 1-drops are better than T-po. But whenever you don't have another 1-drop, you'll always play the T-po instead. The T-po actually hurts your hand a little bit more because you don't get the draw with it. But either one's good because the goal of the deck is to go 1-drop, 2-drop, and then a 4-drop afterward.
Now, did you find that you were always able to ramp turn 2?
It's about a 90% chance that you get one of these cards if you're hard altering at the start of the game for 1-drop into 2-drop. So
Okay.
The majority of games, yes.
Perfect. Let's see your 4-drops now.
So the 4-drop package, we have your standard 4 genies. I went with 4 rabbits and then 4 goats. In general, because of our ramp costing us cards immediately, we want to be drawing cards back as fast as possible to even out our hand and then keep pressure in the game. Playing a genie on turn 3 against most decks is fairly backbreaking because it's going to get a lot of lore and they don't have a good way to interact with it very early. Rabbit's obviously a fantastic card. And Goat, usually when I'm playing this turn 3, it's because they're aggro and I need that bigger character in play. Against like Emerald Amethyst, sometimes Goat's just better so they can't kick Cloud Kick or back one of these and keep their board going and pressing lore. So while the Goat is the weakest of these 3 on turn 3, it is definitely an option where you have to consider it versus various matchups because it just has the better stat line.
I know I kept getting the Cloud Kick with my Genie when I was playing. So now, if you have Genie or a Rabbit, which one do you think you would play first?
It's almost always Genie, but because of the 2 lore. But if you're playing against someone where you feel they are going to be going in and brawling or Cloud Kickering your things, there are times when Rabbit's just better because if you feel your opponent's committed to killing that or banishing that character, getting the Rabbit out is going to give you back more for your value because throwing away a Genie is a lot worse than throwing away a Rabbit.
Okay, perfect. Let's see your next one.
So then we're going to look at our 5-drops as the big follow-ups here. We have 4 Elsas and 2 Bells. Elsa obviously is a fantastic card. It lets us get in there and get rid of whatever big threat the opponent has. The Bells, they sometimes come out turn 5, they sometimes come out a little bit later or on 5 ink or a little later. They really are great because they allow you to keep pressing the advantage by removing damage off your characters and taking out something that's not exerted on your opponent's side, as well as having a great stat line that makes it very difficult for red decks to interact with it because it's at that big 4 power.
Would you ever play Bell without having any damage?
Yes.
Just for the lore?
Yeah.
And
there are times that it gets played out against Ruby Sapphire because they just can't interact with it as well. If they don't have any ice blocks in play, their answer to it's be prepared. If they have an ice block in play, they still have to have Madame Medusa. That 4 power is a great stat line to just get it out there and get lore going.
Okay.
Then, as all Amethyst decks
Your little bounce package.
we have our bounce package, which we'll look into a little bit of what we use with it, other than obviously goats and rabbits are good, but it's there. The foxes are great against aggro. The snakes, they get inked a lot because they don't fit well. We don't want to go turn 2 snake into a lot of decks these days. We want to be ramping, so the snake's a little bit awkward in the deck, but it brings in a lot of power very late game against a lot of decks.
Would you ever just like only play maybe 2 snake and 2 more bells? Is that like a consideration for you?
I think the snakes are needed because against a lot of control decks, you need to have that late game being able to bounce your goats or bounce various different control characters, which we'll get into in a second. But it's needed, but a lot of times they get inked early on because they're just not very interactive early on, or useful early on.
And now let's just say you already inked 2 snake, but you want to ink a 3rd. Would you? Or
yeah. If it's the least valuable card in the hand, it gets inked a lot. I'm very happy to ink these cards all the time. The foxes obviously are a lot stronger because they have rush and they actually interact a lot better with various different aggro decks, but the snakes get inked a lot.
Okay.
Then our big payoffs at the very top are the 3 Hades and 2 Elsas. So this is where a lot of our bounce package is used, is on these Hades against control decks. When you're against Ruby Sapphire and you're able to Hades every single turn, they Sisu or something to kill your snake. You then play Hades and then snake back Hades, killing their Sisu. You trade a snake for a Sisu. They Maleficent Dragon now because they're trying to go through things. And then you Hades it and then you fox back your Hades. And you're both playing characters that banish something when they come into play, but you're banishing much higher value targets, and you're just going through and you're going to grind them out of cards because they have less threats than you overall when you have the bounce package to use with Hades.
Now, are you ever worried that you're giving them too much ink by bouncing back the Hades?
Only when they've really drawn a ton of cards early from Hiram, but a lot of times Hiram's the first target I use for Hades. I want to get rid of I want to get rid of their card draw, and once their card draw is turned off, then I start hitting their threats.
And now, how early can you play Hades, being a blurple deck?
It would be turn 6 usually because I only ramp once. There's occasional times where you do a second ramp and you get it out even earlier, but in general,
You're only ramping once.
We're only ramping once. The big thing about Hades, though, is if you play it out and then they kill it with Madame Medusa or something like that, it's a really bad spot to be in. So if you're playing it out on turn 6, you better have another one in your hand. This one's a sacrificial one because you want to really be saving them until you can bounce it as well as play it.
So this is almost like you're like out for most of the bigger stuff because like a fox really doesn't. Then you're trading a fox in.
Right. Well, and they get to lore with it before your fox gets in there. So that's the big answer for threats. Then Elsa's, they're kind of to push the advantage. Sometimes you even shift them on the 5-drop Elsa, but a lot of times they just come down on as an 8-drop, and they just push the decks. They just slow the other deck down, let you lore a bunch. If you're against control decks, it forces them into be prepared sometimes because they can't have so much advantage at this point with your board loring that it's kind of a removal spell, because if they have some big things out and you force them to be prepped, they're killing their own things as well.
And now, how many Uninkables are you playing? Like, did you ever find your hand pretty cloggy?
The only Uninkables are these 5 plus the 4 rabbits and the 4 genies, so that puts us at 13, which is a reasonable level. I don't really want to be at 13. I like to be lower than that, but whenever I started cutting rabbits from the deck, I saw a noticeable win weight drop against a lot of my good matchups, and thus, in a lot of testing, I put the rabbits back in because they were needed to keep the card advantage up, because a lot of times the way we win is we run our opponent out of resources.
Yep.
We draw more cards than them and then grind them out.
Okay. Let's see what else we got.
So the final cards just complete the deck. We have 3 crabs. They work really well with our 1-drops. They let our T-Pos get in for value. They're just an extra card to help deal with aggro.
What I also liked was doing like the 5-drop Elsa to boost it, and then the crab to make her more powerful, because like that'd be a really powerful
if
card.
you have a crab in play and your opponent doesn't respect it, yes, the 5-drop Elsa is amazing because she comes down, gives your crab a target to trade with, and then your Elsa's huge, and it. All of my opponents, when I had a crab out, respected that play. We're at a level of competition where that doesn't catch people off guard. They know what's coming. Then to round out the deck, we have 4 friends because cards are awesome, and our goal is to get more cards than the opponent. And then the last slots we're going to talk about are kind of the flex spots in the deck where you have options of what to put in the deck. And what I went with was 3 libraries, 2 Wendy's, and 2 Let It Goes, which we'll talk about in order.
Okay.
The libraries are a really strong card with all of our 1-drops. They let us get a lot of value out of them. They are primarily in the deck to deal with Ruby Saphire because early game I can get out a lot of lore, but then I have to change into that control deck where I'm playing the Hades and the bouncing it and doing all this. And the libraries allow me to exchange all my early game aggressive characters in for cards and get a lot more value out of them. And also they diversify my threats where they have to figure out how to get rid of the libraries. And a lot of the Ruby Sapphire decks have been cutting the 6/5 Maui these days, and that is one of their biggest answers to locations. So that is one of the big things. And then occasionally against other matchups, library you're in a spot where you can play it and it gives you so much value your opponent can't do much about it. But they're primarily there as a Ruby Sapphire answer. Wendy is an interesting card. She didn't get a lot of play this weekend, but she has a lot of niche situations where she's really good. Against Ruby Sapphire, because she has Ward and Quest for 2 and 3 power, their only answer to her is be prepared. So if you play her out, she is getting you 2 lore unless they wipe the board. So there are times when our deck is getting very close to victory, and we can play out a Wendy, and it doesn't matter how big their board is. It doesn't matter if they have a Tamatoa and 2 big Sisus out there. They're going to have to prep the board and lose their huge position to this card. So she gives us that extra piece, because even if we play out a goat or something, they might be able to double ice block it, or a Maleficent Dragon or something like that, that she forces the issue immediately. And then the Let It Goes were actually I actually added these very late and going up to 62 cards because I couldn't figure out what else I wanted to remove from the deck because everything was so solid. These just give me a little bit more power, a little bit against Ruby Sapphire. It lets me answer Maui's Shark a little earlier. But also, the biggest issue with this deck is if your opponent's board gets really wide, since we're mostly challenging to take out the opponent's characters, we just can't get them. We can't get as wide as some of the big aggro decks. And this gives a way for, once Elsa's done her thing on one turn, the next turn she can sing and take out the biggest character on their side without any worry. So it gives Elsa a lot more reach, and thus these were put in the deck to try to help against some of those wide boards.
Thanks guys for watching!